Welcome to Midnight Sleep Chronicles. I'm glad you're here tonight. Tonight, we're going somewhere that exists in the space between history and dream, between the world you know and a world that was always there, waiting quietly beneath the surface of everything you've been told. We're traveling to a place where the sky was a living library, where the land was a mother, not a resource, where silence was not empty but full of knowledge so deep that even now, centuries later, it has the power to still something restless inside you. You're going to hear about the Great Plains of North America, about the vast open land that stretches from the horizon to the horizon, about the people who lived there, not as conquerors of the earth, but as its children. And along the way, something in you may recognize what they knew, not because you've read it anywhere, but because some truths don't need to be learned. They only need to be remembered. Before we begin, if this story touches something in you, I'd love it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It truly means the world to me. And I'm always curious, where are you listening from tonight? And what does the sky look like outside your window? Write about it in the comments. Now, let's begin. Act 1. Reality. There is a moment just before sleep fully arrives, when the body grows heavy and the mind begins to loosen its grip on the day. The edges of your thoughts soften. The ceiling above you, if you're looking at it, seems further away than it really is. That space, that particular quality of awareness, half here and half somewhere else, is a place that human beings have known for as long as human beings have existed. And for most of that time, it was considered sacred. Tonight, I want to take you to a place where that sacredness was not something reserved for special occasions or set apart from daily life. It was woven into every moment, from the first light before sunrise to the last star before sleep. A place where a child falling asleep under an open sky was falling asleep not into nothingness, but into a conversation that had been going on for thousands of years between the earth below and the heavens above. That place is the Great Plains of North America. And the time I want you to imagine is before the railroads, before the fences, before the concept of ownership was applied to something as vast and breathing as land itself. We're talking about a world that existed in full, rich, complex, deeply philosophical life for tens of thousands of years before European settlers arrived with their different understanding of what the earth was for. The plains themselves are extraordinary if you've never stood on them. The land there is so flat and so wide that the sky seems not just above you, but around you, as if you're standing inside a bowl of blue or black, and the earth is the round floor beneath you. On a clear night on the Great Plains, you can see thousands upon thousands of stars, the kind of sky that makes modern city dwellers catch their breath because they have never seen it. No electric light for hundreds of kilometers. No haze from highways or buildings. Just the cold, clear black of the universe, and every star it contains, burning with the same light it has always burned. The same light the Lakota people watched. The same light the Pawnee mapped onto stretched elk skin. The same light the Navajo named with words that carried whole philosophies inside them. Now imagine that you are lying on your back on the grass of those plains. The earth underneath you is warm from the sun, even though the sun went down hours ago. The grass bends slightly in a wind that smells of sage and something sweeter, something that has no name in English. Above you, the stars are not decoration. They are not background. They are beings, relatives, ancestors, maps, calendars, and teachers, all at once. They have names and languages that were spoken here for thousands of years before the word astronomy was ever invented. And those names do not describe what the stars are made of. They describe what the stars mean, what they teach, what they offer to the human heart looking up in the dark. This is not mythology in the sense of something untrue or childish. This is one of the most sophisticated systems of knowledge that human beings have ever developed. A way of understanding the cosmos that was practical enough to guide when to plant corn and when to begin a buffalo hunt, and at the same time deep enough to address the most fundamental questions any human being ever asks. Why am I here? How do I live well? What connects me to everything else that exists? The peoples of the Great Plains, and we should say peoples, because they were many, the Lakota and Dakota and Nakota nations, the Pawnee, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Comanche, the Crow, the Blackfoot, and dozens of others, each with their own language, their own ceremonies, their own star stories, their own relationship with this particular piece of the earth. These peoples did not have a word that translates directly into religion. This is not because they lacked spiritual life. It is because their spiritual life was not a category separate from everything else. It was not something you did on certain days in certain buildings. It was something that permeated every moment of existence, the way water permeates the land, invisibly and completely. The Lakota, whose territory centered around what is now South Dakota and the surrounding states, had a concept at the heart of their entire worldview, a phrase that is spoken as a prayer, a greeting, a reminder, and a worldview all at once. Mitakuye Oyasin. It means, in translation, all my relations, or we are all related. But those 4 English words flatten something that opens into great depth when you sit with it. It is not saying that human beings are related to each other, though it includes that. It is saying that you, sitting here right now, are related to every living thing. To the elk and the eagle, to the grass bending in the wind, to the river and the stone in the river and the water moving over the stone, to the star above you, and the dream forming in the mind that has not yet fallen asleep. All of it is your family. All of it is kin. The Lakota holy man, known to history as Black Elk, who was born in 1863 and who lived through the most devastating period of the destruction of Lakota traditional life, left behind words that have been read by millions of people since they were recorded in the early 20th century. He described the universe in a way that feels strangely resonant if you are lying quietly in the dark. The center of the universe, he said, dwells Wakantanka, the great mystery, and that center is everywhere. It is within each of us. The center is everywhere. Think about that for a moment. Not a center that is over there, somewhere you must travel to reach. A center that is wherever you happen to be. Which means that the place you are in right now, in your bed, with your eyes growing heavy, is the center of the universe. The great mystery is not distant from you. Tonight, it is as close as your own heartbeat. The Lakota had no word for religion because they had no concept of a sacred that was separate from the ordinary. All things were what they called wakan, a word often translated as sacred, but which also contains the meaning of mysterious, powerful, beyond ordinary understanding. Not everything was equally wakan, but everything participated in the quality of sacredness to some degree. A rock on the ground was wakan. A spider in its web was wakan. The moment you are living through right now, this exact breath, this particular gathering of quiet in your chest, it too participates in something beyond the ordinary, even if it feels perfectly, peacefully ordinary. This is one of the great insights of the Plains peoples, and one that modern science, coming from a completely different direction, has begun to arrive at independently. There are no sharp boundaries between things. The idea that you end at your skin and the rest of the world begins there. That you are a separate object moving through other separate objects is something that feels true from inside the experience of being human. But it may not be the deepest truth about what we are. The Lakota knew this not from laboratory equipment, but from something more immediate. From the felt sense of living closely with the land, the animals, the seasons, and the stars for generation after generation after generation. The plains themselves were a teacher. The flatness and the openness meant that you were never surrounded, never enclosed. You could see far in every direction. And that visibility created a particular relationship with time. You could watch a storm build from 50 kilometers away. You could see the same ridge that your grandmother saw, and her grandmother before her, and her grandmother before her. The land did not change in the way that human lives changed. The buttes and the river bends were older than any story, older than any language. To live in that landscape was to feel small in a way that was not humiliating, but clarifying. You were one creature among many, one life among uncountable lives, one wave on an ocean that had been moving long before you arrived and would keep moving long after you were gone. And that, paradoxically, was comforting. Not because it made you unimportant, but because it meant you were held. You did not have to hold everything yourself. The land was holding you. The sky was watching over you. The ancestors who had walked this same earth were still present in it. Their knowledge still alive in the stories told around fires, their love still embedded in the ceremonies passed from one generation to the next. Among the most extraordinary creatures of those plains was the bison, and the relationship between the plains peoples and the bison is one of the most profound examples of what it means to live in genuine reciprocity with another species. There were, at their peak, somewhere between 30 and 60 million bison on the Great Plains, a number so vast that the early European explorers who first saw the herds compared them to the ocean. They moved in waves. The sound of them approaching was audible from kilometers away, a low rumble that you felt in the ground before you heard it in the air. The dust they raised could be seen from even farther. For the Lakota and the Cheyenne and the Comanche and all the other plains peoples, the bison was not merely food and clothing and shelter, though it was all of those things and more. The bison was a relative. It was a being that had offered itself to the people, and the people owed it respect and gratitude and a kind of love that we might struggle to name in our language. Before a hunt, there were prayers. After a successful hunt, there were more prayers. Prayers of thanks to the bison, whose life had become the life of the people. Prayers that acknowledged the transfer of one being's existence into another's. Nothing was wasted. Not the hide, not the bones, not the organs. Every part of the animal was used, because to waste it would have been to dishonor the gift. This is so different from our current relationship with the animals we eat that it is almost impossible to fully imagine. But try for a moment. What would it mean to feel genuine gratitude toward the food you eat? To acknowledge that something died so that you could live, and to hold that acknowledgement not as a source of guilt, but as a source of reverence? The Plains peoples had developed over thousands of years a psychological and spiritual technology for living with that truth, for being honest about the cost of life, and for meeting that cost with grace. The Lakota had a name for the bison that placed it in the same category of being as themselves, as kin, as relative, as someone you owed consideration. When a hunter killed a bison, he addressed its spirit directly, explaining his need, expressing his gratitude, promising that the bison's death would not be wasted. This was not superstition. It was a way of maintaining consciousness about the web of life in which humans were embedded, of refusing the comfortable lie that we can take without acknowledgement, consume without consequence, receive without giving. We tend to think of the historical period of the American West, the 1800s, as a time when this world was meeting its end. And there is real grief in that history, grief we should not rush past. But what I want to offer you tonight is something different, which is the possibility that what these peoples knew was not simply lost. Some of it is still here. Some of it is alive in the small number of elders who still carry it. Some of it is encoded in the land itself, which does not forget. And some of it speaks directly to something in you, something that recognized a long time ago that the way we usually experience the world is not the only way it can be experienced. The Great Plains were alive in a way that most of us have forgotten the earth can be. Let that thought settle into you as you let yourself grow a little heavier, a little quieter. The earth beneath you right now, beneath the floor, beneath the building, beneath the pavement, if there is pavement, is the same earth that was alive under those stars on those plains. The same earth that the Lakota elders sat upon with bare feet, feeling, as he described it himself, strengthened by the contact, clarified, brought closer to the mystery of all living things. The stars above those plains were real stars. The same stars are above you now. The knowledge is not as far away as it seems. Act 2. Legends. Long before the first wagon train crossed the Missouri River, long before anyone drew a line on a map and called it the frontier, the night sky above the Great Plains was a living text. Every people who lived under it had their own way of reading it, and those readings were not casual or decorative. They were navigational, agricultural, ceremonial, and philosophical all at once. They were the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of careful attention to the same sky, generation after generation, noticing, remembering, and passing on what they noticed. The Skeety band of the Pawnee people, who lived across what is now Nebraska and Kansas, were perhaps the most meticulous astronomers among all the Plains peoples, although astronomer is too cold and too separated a word for what they were. They were, more precisely, people for whom the sky and the earth were two halves of a single sacred reality, and who organized their entire civilization around that unity. Their earth lodges, large circular structures covered with sod and supported by timber, were not merely practical dwellings. They were models of the cosmos. The circular floor represented the earth. The domed roof represented the sky. The central fire pit at the heart of the lodge represented the sacred center that connects all things. And in the roof, there was an opening, a smoke hole through which the fire could breathe and the night could enter. When a Pawnee family lay down to sleep in their lodge, they were not simply lying in a house. They were lying inside a universe. They could look up through that opening and see the stars directly overhead. And those stars were not distant and indifferent. They were family members, ancestors who had been placed in the sky by the Creator and charged with watching over the people below. The Pawnee believed that Tirawahat, the Creator of all things, had spoken the universe into existence through the movements of the stars. Tirawahat, whose name means something like this expanse or this vastness, was not an anthropomorphic god with a personality and preferences. Tirawahat was the totality of what exists, experienced as will and intelligence and love. And the stars were the first way that Tirawahat communicated with the people below. The 4 posts that supported the roof of a Pawnee Earth Lodge were not random. They represented the 4 great stars that the Pawnee understood as the pillars of the universe. 4 guardian beings placed at the corners of existence to hold it all in place. Each post was painted the color of its star. When the family sat inside their lodge for a meal, or when the grandmother told stories to the children gathered around the fire. They were sitting inside an image of the universe, held up by the same forces that held up the sky. The sacred and the everyday were the same place. The Pawnee had a star chart, one of the very few physical records of indigenous astronomical knowledge that survived the devastating losses of the following centuries. It was painted on a piece of tanned elk skin, and it showed the positions of the stars with such accuracy that modern astronomers have been able to identify what was being depicted. The chart is now kept in the Field Museum in Chicago. To look at it is to feel the enormity of what was nearly lost. Whole generations of observation, philosophy, and devotion to the sky, compressed into symbols on an animal's skin, carried across centuries by people who understood its value even when the world around them was trying to convince them that their knowledge was worthless. It was not worthless. It was, and is, extraordinary. The Pawnee knew that Venus, which they called the morning star, traces a pattern across the sky over the course of 9 months, the same length of time as human gestation. They saw in this a connection, a divine commentary on the nature of creation and renewal. They knew the positions and movements of dozens of stars with a precision that early European observers found astonishing, and which researchers continue to study today. They built their villages in configurations that mirrored the positions of star groups in the sky. Their entire society was an attempt to live in alignment with the cosmos, to be, here on Earth, what the stars were in heaven. This desire to live in alignment with something larger and more enduring than individual human life is something you may recognize from your own experience, even if you have never articulated it quite that way. That feeling of wanting your life to mean something, that sense that there is a right way to live, a way that is in harmony with something real and true. That longing for connection that goes beyond the personal and touches the infinite. The Pawnee were not waiting for death to find that connection. They lived inside it. Every morning, when the lodge entrance was open to face east, toward the rising morning star, the act of waking up was itself a ceremony of alignment with the universe. To the south and west of the Pawnee lands lived the Navajo people, the Diné, who called themselves simply the people, a name that many indigenous nations use for themselves and which carries a particular meaning when you understand it. Not us as opposed to them, but us as beings who participate in the life of this world, who walk upon this earth in relationship with everything that exists. The Navajo had, and have, a concept at the heart of their philosophy that has no exact translation into English, a concept so central to their way of living that their language returns to it constantly, the way a musical piece returns to its central theme. The word is Hozhó, and it is variously translated as beauty, harmony, balance, order, and well-being. But the translation that opens the most doors is probably walking in beauty, because Hozho is not a state you arrive at and then possess. It is a practice. It is a way of moving through the world. To live in Hozho is to be in right relationship with everything around you. It means that your thoughts are aligned with your words, and your words are aligned with your actions. It means that you take what you need from the earth and you give back gratitude, attention, and care. It means that when balance is disrupted, whether by illness, conflict, or loss, you do not accept the disruption as simply the way things are. You seek restoration. You perform ceremony. You call beauty back into your life and the life of those around you. The Navajo Blessing Way prayer, one of the most beautiful pieces of language that exists in any tradition, ends with the phrase, Hózhó na sha du. which translates roughly as, "May I walk in beauty," not "may I feel better" or "may things go well." May I walk in beauty. All the days of my life, may each step be placed with awareness, with care, with knowledge that the ground beneath my feet is sacred, that the sky above me is sacred, that the breath in my lungs is sacred, that the person I meet on the path is sacred, that the bird crossing from left to right is sacred, that the silence before sleep is sacred. The Navajo cosmology was built around the sky as father and the earth as mother. And the life of a human being was understood as the child of that sacred union, held between two parents who were always present, always loving, always providing everything that was actually needed. The four sacred mountains that define the boundaries of the Navajo homeland, and which are still considered sacred today, were not merely geographic markers. They were the pillars of a home. And within that home, every direction held meaning, every season held teaching, every creature had something to say if you were quiet enough and humble enough to listen. The Navajo created dozens of constellations that Western astronomy would not recognize, figures in the sky drawn not along the same lines that Greek and Roman astronomers drew. Revolving man and revolving woman, first man and first woman's fire. The Pleiades, which they called Diliehe, and associated with the planting season because when those stars disappeared from the evening sky, it was time to put seeds in the earth. The sky was a practical guide and a philosophical text simultaneously. The stories told about these constellations were not told in summer. The Navajo told sacred stories only in winter, when the snakes were sleeping and the family was gathered inside the hogan around the fire. The stories were passed from elder to child in the warmth of that enclosed space, with the cold outside and the stars visible through the smoke hole above. To hear a story was to participate in something that went back farther than any living person could remember. The elder telling the story was carrying it forward from an elder who had carried it from an elder who had carried it back and back and back through generations to the moment when the story was not a story, but a living event. We tend to think of oral tradition as an inferior cousin of written tradition, something that gets garbled or distorted over time, like a long game of telephone. But this misunderstands what oral tradition actually is. A story told aloud by a skilled elder, told to a specific audience in a specific moment, is not the same thing as a document. It is a performance, a ceremony, and a transmission. The elder does not just convey information. The elder conveys a way of paying attention, a way of holding knowledge in the body, a way of relating to the world that cannot be fully captured in text. The children gathered around the fire did not just hear the story. They felt it. They dreamed about it. They carried it in their bodies. There is something in this that speaks directly to where you are right now. You are in the borderland between waking and sleeping. And in that space, something opens that is more receptive than ordinary waking consciousness. Stories told in this state, heard with the mind already beginning to release its grip on the ordinary, go somewhere different. They find a home in a deeper part of you. The Navajo elders knew this. The Pawnee grandmothers telling star stories to children in the firelit lodge knew this. They were not just entertaining. They were planting seeds in the fertile ground of the drowsy mind. There was another practice among the Navajo that speaks to this quality of attention, this capacity to put everything you have into a single act of devotion. The Navajo sand paintings, created during healing ceremonies, were works of art of extraordinary precision and beauty, made by specialists who had studied for years to learn the hundreds of designs, each one specific to a particular ceremony and a particular need. The sand painters worked with colored minerals and plant materials, creating images that could take an entire day or longer to complete. images that depicted the holy people, the sacred mountains, the four directions, the healing symbols that corresponded to the specific illness or imbalance being addressed. When the ceremony was finished, when its work was done, the sand painting was dismantled, not preserved, not displayed, returned to the earth. The point was never to make something that would last. The point was to make something that was perfect for this moment, that held the beauty and the prayer and the intention of this specific healing for this specific person at this specific time. The impermanence was not a flaw. It was the whole point. Nothing lasts, and that is beautiful, not tragic, because it means that each moment is complete in itself, and each act of care and devotion is already its own fulfillment, regardless of whether anything physical survives it. Think about what you have done in your life that was like this, acts of love or care that left no trace, that were complete in their doing and needed no monument. A meal cooked for someone who was sad, an hour spent listening when someone needed to be heard, a child held in the night when they were frightened. These things are the sand paintings of ordinary human life, perfect and impermanent and entirely real. There is something in the teachings of the Plains peoples that converges with what the deepest thinkers in every philosophical tradition have arrived at independently, which is that the meaning of life is not found in what you accumulate or achieve or leave behind, but in the quality of attention and love you bring to the moments as they arrive. The Navajo sand painter who spent a day creating something that would be undone at nightfall knew this in their hands and in their body, not as an idea, but as a practice. The Lakota had their own relationship with the night sky, and it too was intimate in a way that is difficult for us to fully imagine. The constellation that Western astronomy calls the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters, was known to the Lakota as the Seven Bulls, and its position in the sky in autumn signaled the beginning of the buffalo hunting season. But it was not only a calendar marker. It was a presence, a family of beings in the sky who were related to the buffalo below, who communicated in their movements when the time was right for the great hunts that sustained Lakota life. The Milky Way, that river of light that spans the entire night sky and which city dwellers today almost never see, was known to the Algonquin peoples, whose territory stretched from the Great Plains east toward the Atlantic, as the pathway of souls, the road that the spirits of the dead walked on their journey to the next world. To look up at the Milky Way was to look at the road your ancestors were traveling. They were still there, still moving, still present in a different form. The universe was not empty. It was populated with all the people who had ever lived, and they were watching over you from that great river of light. Among the Ojibwe people who lived in the forests and along the Great Lakes to the north and east of the plains, the star that Western astronomy calls Polaris, the North Star, the fixed point around which all others seem to rotate, was called the hole in the sky. It was not a star so much as a window, the place where the universe opened into something beyond itself, the place where the one who had gone before could still look down at the living below. To navigate by the hole in the sky was not just practical. It was a constant reminder that you were not lost, that above the turning wheel of the heavens, something was fixed, something was constant, something was always there. Think for a moment about what it would mean to live with that sky as your ceiling every night. Not the painted ceiling of a building, not the ceiling of your bedroom, but the actual sky, with its 10,000 stars visible to the naked eye, each one named, each one carrying a story, each one part of a living community that had been watching over human beings since before any human being could remember. Sleep under that sky would not be a withdrawal from the world. It would be a submission to it, a letting go into the arms of something older and wiser and more patient than anything the waking mind could grasp. The Cherokee people, whose homeland was in the southeast, but whose knowledge traditions share deep similarities with Plains peoples, had a practice of decision-making that took into account not only the present generation, but 7 generations into the future. Before taking any significant action, the community considered what the consequences would be, not just for themselves, but for the great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren who would inherit the world that this decision helped to create. This is not just environmentalism, though it is that. It is a philosophy of time that understands the present moment as part of a chain of responsibility stretching in both directions, backward to the ancestors and forward to the descendants not yet born. We tend to think about time as something we are moving through, a river whose current carries us from past to future. But many of the peoples of this continent understood time differently, as a circle, or more precisely as a spiral, always returning to similar positions, but never to exactly the same place. This was encoded in the medicine wheel, a circle divided into 4 quadrants representing the 4 directions and the 4 seasons and the 4 stages of human life: the child and the youth and the adult and the elder. You were always moving through the wheel. You were always coming around to the same teachings again. But each time you came around, you were older, and you understood more, and the teaching went deeper. There is something deeply comforting in this way of understanding time, and you may find it settling into you as you drift a little deeper into the quiet. You have been here before. Not this exact moment, but this kind of moment. The moment of releasing the day, the moment of letting go, the moment of trusting that the world will still be there when you wake. You have done this thousands of times. Your ancestors did it millions of times before you. The act of falling asleep is one of the oldest human acts, one of the most fundamental acts of trust. The act of saying, "For these hours, I release my grip on everything and I let myself be held by something larger than my own conscious will." The Plains peoples had that trust, not just at night, but throughout the day. They trusted the land to provide what was needed. They trusted the seasons to turn. They trusted the stars to mark the right moment for ceremony and planting and harvest. And this trust was not blind or passive. It was earned through attention, through thousands of years of careful observation of what the land and the sky actually did. Not what someone told you they did, but what you yourself witnessed, season after season, generation after generation. It was trust built on relationship, and relationship built on presence. That kind of presence, that quality of being fully here, fully attentive to this blade of grass and this cloud, and this particular way the light is falling, is something that the Navajo Hozho and the Lakota Mitakuye Oyasin are both pointing toward. You cannot walk in beauty if you are somewhere else in your mind. You cannot feel your relations if you are too distracted to notice them. The spiritual life of the Plains peoples was, at its deepest level, a practice of attention, a practice of showing up fully for the life you are actually living. Act 3. Mythology. We have been traveling toward something, and now we are almost there. The campfire is low. The stars are bright. The grass is moving in a wind that smells of sage and something older still. This is the place where history softens into myth, where the particular dissolves into the universal, where the stories of one people begin to speak to something that belongs to all of us. There is a story told in different forms by many of the peoples of the Plains. and it goes something like this. Long ago, before the people had been given the ceremonies that would sustain them, before they knew how to live in proper relationship with the earth and the sky, a being appeared to them. In the Lakota version, she came from the direction of the rising sun, and she was dressed in white buffalo hide, and she walked toward the people as if she had been walking forever and would keep walking forever after she left. She was the white buffalo calf woman, Tisanwi, and she carried with her the sacred pipe that would become the central instrument of Lakota prayer and ceremony for all the generations to follow. She taught the people the 7 sacred rites that would allow them to live in balance and beauty. She taught them how to pray, how to ask for guidance, how to give thanks, how to mourn, how to welcome the young into adulthood, how to honor the cycles of the earth. And when she had finished teaching, she walked back in the direction she had come from, and she became a white buffalo calf, and then a red one, and then a black one, and then a yellow one, the 4 colors of the 4 directions, the 4 races of humanity. And then she was gone. But not gone exactly. The pipe she had brought remained, and the teachings she had given remained, and the knowledge that such a being had once walked among the people and cared enough to teach them, that remained too. It became part of the foundation of Lakota life, the sense that they were not, they, alone in the universe, that the universe itself was interested in their well-being, that the knowledge of how to live well had been given as a gift and was available to anyone who was humble enough to ask for it. The Pawnee had their own version of this kind of story. Their creation myth tells of how the universe began, not as something that happened to passive beings, but as an act of love between the morning star and the evening star. 2 great celestial beings whose sacred dance across the sky produced, eventually, the first human beings. You were not an accident, the story says. You were the child of a love story that began before the earth was formed. Your existence is the fulfillment of a desire that runs through the very architecture of the cosmos. This is a radically different understanding of what a human being is. In a universe that does not care whether you exist or not, and that is the universe that most modern people inhabit, at least implicitly, life has no inherent meaning. You must manufacture meaning for yourself from the materials available. It is a lonely and exhausting project. But in a universe where you are the offspring of a cosmic love story, where your birth was anticipated and your existence is cherished by forces so large that we can only gesture toward them with words like the morning star and the evening star, you do not need to manufacture meaning. You are meaning. Your presence here, in this moment, breathing, drifting toward sleep, is an event in a love story that began at the beginning of time. The Navajo creation story tells of how the holy people, Hózhó, placed the stars in the sky deliberately and with great care. First man and first woman worked with the being called Black God, who is the god of fire and of stars, to arrange the constellations that would guide the people below. They laid out crystal points on a blanket and placed them one by one in the sky, giving each its name and its teaching, organizing the heavens into a kind of sacred library that anyone could read who knew the language. And then Coyote, that irreverent and necessary presence in so many indigenous stories, that force of chaos and humor and unexpected truth, grabbed a corner of the blanket and flung the remaining stars into the sky all at once, scattering them randomly, creating the Milky Way and all the unnamed stars that fill the spaces between the constellations. This is why, the story says, not all stars have names. Not all of the sky can be organized into neat meaning. Some of it is wild, undetermined, open to interpretation, alive with the unpredictable energy of Coyote's throw. There is so much wisdom in this story that it is almost too much to hold at once. The part of the sky that was carefully arranged speaks to the human need for order and meaning, for the sense that things make sense, that there is a pattern, that the universe is trying to tell you something that can be understood. And the wild, unnamed stars speak to the part of reality that is always beyond our organizing, always exceeding our categories, always more than our most careful maps. Both are true. Both are necessary. The universe contains both the constellation and the chaos, both the named and the nameless. And a human life that is fully lived contains both too. The medicine wheel, that circular map of reality used by many plains peoples, is a teaching that operates on many levels simultaneously. On one level, it is simply a way of organizing experience into 4 directions, 4 seasons, 4 stages of life, 4 elements. But on another level, it is pointing towards something much more radical, which is that reality is always whole. That no matter where you are on the wheel, no matter which direction you are facing or which season you are living through or which stage of life you have reached, you are not partial. You are not incomplete. You are exactly where you need to be, on a journey that takes a complete circle. We tend to think of wholeness as something we approach gradually, a destination we are trying to reach. I will be whole when I have dealt with my past, when I have healed this wound, when I have reached this goal, when I have become this person I am trying to become. But the medicine wheel suggests that wholeness is not ahead of you. It is the shape of the path itself. The path is the circle, and you are always, in every moment, on the circle. The healing is not arriving at a different point. The healing is learning to trust the path you are on. Black Elk, in describing the central vision of his life, a vision he received as a young man and which guided everything he did for the rest of his long life, spoke of the sacred hoop of the people, the circle of life that included not just the Lakota nation, but all peoples, all creatures, all of existence. In the center of the hoop, in his vision, stood the tree of life, and the tree was flowering, and its flowers were for all the peoples of the earth. This vision was not a small or private thing. It was a cosmological statement about the nature of reality, that all things are one, that the hoop holds everything, that the tree at the center blooms for everyone who comes to rest beneath it. He said something that has stayed with people who have encountered it for nearly 100 years now, something about the shape of the universe and the shape of human wisdom. Everything the power of the world does, he said, is done in a circle. The sky is round, and the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind, in its greatest power, whirls. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. The moon does the same, and both are round. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing, and always come back again to where they were. The life of a man is a circle from childhood to childhood, and so it is in everything where power moves. Let that settle into you. The life of a man is a circle from childhood to childhood. You began in a state of pure openness, in trust, in absolute dependence, in a receptivity that adults have to work hard to recover. And perhaps what the spiritual traditions of many peoples are pointing toward, including the traditions of these plains peoples, is that the completion of the circle is not death, but a return to that original openness, not in ignorance, but in wisdom. Having seen everything the circle holds, the joy and the grief and the surprise and the loss, arriving at the far end of it with a heart that has been broken open by living and is therefore, paradoxically, more open than it was at the beginning. The Ojibwe people, whose territory stretched from the Great Plains east to the Great Lakes and north into Canada, had a teaching that they called the Seven Grandfathers, 7 gifts of wisdom that were given to the people to help them live well. These 7 gifts were Nibwakawin, wisdom; Zagi Idiwin, love; Minadendamoin, respect; Akoda Iwin, bravery; Guayakwa Diziwin, honesty; Dabadin Diziwin, humility; and Debwewin, truth. Each of these was associated with an animal whose nature embodied the teaching. Wisdom with the beaver, love with the eagle, respect with the buffalo, bravery with the bear, honesty with the raven, humility with the wolf, and truth with the turtle. These were not abstract virtues. They were ways of relating, ways of being in the world. And they were gifts, not requirements. Not commandments from above, but offerings from below. From the grandmothers and grandfathers of all the animals, from the earth itself. Given freely to human beings who were loved and trusted to find their way. That last word, trusted. The earth, in these traditions, did not create human beings and then stand over them anxiously, waiting to catch them in failure. It trusted them. It gave them what they needed and then allowed them to find their way, knowing that the way would not always be straight, that there would be confusion and grief and error, and that these too were part of the teaching. The coyote who flung the stars, the trickster who upsets plans and forces adaptation, was not an enemy. Coyote was a teacher of a different kind, the teacher who breaks open what has become rigid, who refuses to let the comfortable become the only possible. Among the Lakota and many other plains peoples, there was a practice called hanblecheya, which is translated roughly as crying for a vision, or more poetically as lamenting, reaching towards something beyond the ordinary. A young person, at a threshold moment in their life, would go alone to a hilltop or sacred place, without food, without water, without shelter, and would spend several days in solitude and prayer, not doing anything, not solving anything, simply being present, fully present, in the most stripped down and honest way a human being can be present, with all the comfortable distractions removed, with nothing between themselves and the sky and the earth and whatever the universe had to say. The vision that might come during this time was not sought aggressively. It was waited for, the way you wait for a bird to come to your hand, with stillness and trust and no demands. And what arrived was not always dramatic. Sometimes it was a dream. Sometimes it was a quality of silence. Sometimes it was nothing that could be named, but something that was felt. A shift in understanding so subtle and so complete that words could only gesture toward it afterward. This practice speaks to something that modern life has almost completely eliminated, which is the experience of genuine solitude and silence, of being alone with the universe without anything intervening. We fill our lives with noise so thoroughly, with music and screens and conversations and notifications, that most of us have never experienced the kind of silence that was available to a person lying alone on a hilltop under the plain sky, 3 days without food, listening with their whole body, and not just their ears. That silence was not empty. The plains peoples did not seek it because they believed there was nothing to hear. They sought it because there was everything to hear, and most of it could only be heard when the ordinary noise stopped. The wind speaking through the grass, the particular quality of the light at a certain hour, the feeling of the earth under your back communicating something that has no words, but that the body receives and translates into a kind of knowing. The sense, arriving gradually, that you are not alone, even in the total absence of other human beings, that the world around you is conscious and attentive and interested in you, that you exist in a relationship, not as a solitary point of awareness floating in an indifferent void. This is the knowledge that the vision quest was designed to make impossible to deny. You could read about it. You could be told about it by every elder in your community. But until you had lain on the earth for 3 days and felt it in your own body, it was only an idea. The Plains peoples understood, with great sophistication, the difference between knowing something conceptually and knowing it bodily, in the way that changes how you move through the world afterward. The ceremonies, the vision quests, the sweat lodges, the sun dances, all of the great practices of these traditions were ways of knowing things in the body rather than only in the mind. And now, as you lie here, there is something like a much smaller version of that ancient practice available to you. You have removed yourself from the ordinary world. You have turned off the light. You have released the tasks and the conversations and the plans. You are here, on the earth, in the dark, with the sky somewhere above. You and the stars above that, and the limitless dark above the stars. You are not seeking a vision. You are only lying down. But something in that act, that simple, ancient act of lying down on the earth and letting it hold you, participates in the same quality of trust, the same willingness to let go, the same quiet acknowledgement that there is something larger than your individual life, and that this something is not hostile or indifferent, but deeply, fundamentally, structurally generous. The earth has been holding sleeping human beings for at least 300,000 years, which is roughly how long our species has existed. Every night of those 300,000 years, somewhere on this planet, a human being lay down and trusted the darkness and was held. The specific bodies are gone, but the act continues. You are doing it right now. You are part of an unbroken chain that stretches back further than any story, further than any language, all the way to the beginning of what it means to be human. There is a word used in Western culture that was never used by the peoples of the Great Plains themselves to describe their homeland, and that word is frontier. The frontier, in the 19th century European American imagination, was the edge of the known world, the boundary between civilization and wilderness, between order and chaos, between the familiar and the terrifying. It was a line that moved westward, as settlement moved westward, always just ahead of where the roads ended. On this side of the line, safety. On that side, the unknown. But to the Lakota, the Pawnee, the Navajo, the Cherokee, there was no such line. There was no wilderness to be afraid of, because the land was not wild in the sense of chaotic and hostile. It was alive, and alive in a way that was knowable, that was in relationship with the people who lived in it. They had walked every part of it. They had named every feature of it. They knew which plants grew where and what they were for. They knew where the water was when the surface was dry. They knew where the animals sheltered in winter and where they moved in summer. They knew the sky above it in every season. For them, what the settlers called wilderness was home, and home in the deepest sense, not merely a place to sleep, but a place whose every stone and stream and star was familiar, beloved, and part of the same family as themselves. The idea of the frontier was not a geographic description. It was a psychological description of where one way of knowing ended and another began. And there are frontiers like this inside every human life. Places where the familiar gives way to the unknown, where the maps run out, where you have to navigate by something other than what you already know. Illness, grief, the ending of one life phase and the beginning of another, the moment before sleep, when the organized self begins to loosen and something less organized, but more inclusive starts to take over. The Plains peoples, in their practice of vision quests and ceremonies, in their willingness to sit with the unknown in darkness for days at a time, had developed a relationship with their inner frontiers as well as their outer ones. They did not treat the unknown as the enemy. They treated it as the teacher. The place where the map ran out was not where you turned back. It was where the learning that mattered most was waiting for you. This is the gift that their knowledge traditions offer to anyone who sits with them long enough. Not a set of beliefs to adopt or a set of practices to perform, though those have their own value, but a different relationship with the unknown. A trust that what lies beyond the edge of what you can control and comprehend is not emptiness or danger, but something ancient and generous and deeply interested in your well-being. The same trust that a sleeping body places in the dark and in the earth and in whatever and in it is that keeps the heart beating through the night without any conscious assistance from the mind that briefly held the day. The frontier, understood this way, is not something out there. It is the edge of this breath, the place where exhaling ends and before inhaling begins. That tiny interval of nothing that is somehow never quite nothing. That gap where the body waits in perfect trust for the next breath to arrive. You cross that frontier thousands of times a day, and each time the breath arrives. The earth holds, the heart beats. And in the morning, you open your eyes to a world that is, in its bones and beneath its bones, the same world the Pawnee looked at through their smoke holes at the stars. There is a Cherokee phrase, sometimes attributed to an elder, sometimes to the oral tradition generally, that describes something essential about this whole philosophical orientation. It says, "We do not own the land. The land owns us." Not in the sense that the land has power over us in the way a master has power over a servant, but in the sense that we belong to the land the way a wave belongs to the ocean. You cannot separate the wave from the water and have the wave still be a wave. You cannot separate a human being from the earth that made them and have a complete human being. We are made of the earth. Every mineral in your bones was once part of the ground somewhere. The water in your blood has been rain, has been river, has been ocean, has been cloud, countless times before it became part of you. The oxygen in your lungs right now was exhaled by a tree somewhere, possibly a tree standing in a forest that existed long before any of the cities we now inhabit. You are the earth, temporarily organized into the form of a human being, conscious, breathing, dreaming, loved. This is not a metaphor. It is biology. It is chemistry. It is the literal truth of what you are. But the Plains peoples knew it not as scientific fact, but as lived experience. As something you could feel in your feet when you walked on the ground without shoes. As something you could feel in your chest when you looked up at the Milky Way and recognized that the atoms you're made of were forged in the same stellar processes that made those stars. Mitakuye Oyasin, all my relations, the stone and the river and the grass and the star and the sleeping child and the woman with silver hair and the buffalo on the horizon and the eagle riding a thermal and you right now, in this exact moment, in this exact state of beautiful, slow, dissolving awareness. All of it is your family. All of it is kin. The Navajo Blessing Way prayer, which I mentioned earlier, is not a prayer you say once and then go on with your life. It is a prayer that is repeated at the end of ceremonies, sometimes for hours, weaving a kind of net of beauty around the person who needs restoration. Imagine lying inside that prayer the way you lie inside a warm room. Imagine it being said for you right now. each line a gentle placing of beauty on one side of you and then the other, before you and behind you, above you and below you. Beauty before me as I walk. Beauty behind me as I walk. Beauty above me as I walk. Beauty below me as I walk. Beauty all around me as I walk. That is not just a prayer for someone in distress. That is a description of the universe as it actually is, according to the knowledge tradition of a people who paid attention to it for thousands of years. Beauty is before you. Beauty is behind you. Beauty is above you in the stars. Beauty is below you in the earth that holds you. You are surrounded by it. You are moving through it. And perhaps, in this moment, you are not even moving. Perhaps you are simply resting in the center of it, held. The ancient Pawnee star chart, that piece of elk skin with its careful drawings of the sky, was found and preserved and is now in a museum in Chicago. But the knowledge it represents is not in the museum. The knowledge is in the sky. The same sky that arched over the Nebraska plains when that chart was made is arching over you right now. Every star that mattered to those meticulous, devoted Pawnee astronomers is still there. Morning star is still rising in the east. Evening star is still following the sun down in the west. The North Star, the hole in the sky, the fixed star, is still holding its position at the center of the turning wheel. The same calm, unmoving point around which everything else revolves. There is something in that fixed star that feels like what all these traditions are pointing toward when they speak of the great mystery, of Wakantanka, of Tirawahat, of the source that underlies all the spinning and changing and becoming and dissolving. It is not that the great mystery is far away, beyond the fixed star, somewhere you cannot reach. It is that the great mystery is the quality of fixedness itself, the quality of being present, of not being swept away by the motion, of watching the great wheel turn with something like love, or at least with something that has no better word than love. You are closer to that fixed point than you think. Closer right now than you usually are during the waking day, when the motion of things carries you along so quickly that it is easy to forget that there is anything stationary at all. In this state, this gathering quiet, this heaviness in the limbs, and the softening of the boundaries between thought and no thought, you are very close to the still center. The traditions of the Great Plains were not trying to produce extraordinary states. They were not promising that if you followed their teachings, you would have visions or gain supernatural powers or be admitted to some exclusive circle of the enlightened. They were, at their heart, trying to help ordinary people live ordinary lives with extraordinary quality of presence. Ordinary life was already extraordinary if you paid attention to it. The corn growing, the buffalo running, the child born, the elder dying, the rain falling, the star rising. None of this was mundane if you approached it with the awareness that it was sacred, that it was your family, that it was a gift being given to you in this moment and in every moment, regardless of whether you noticed. Notice, right now. Not anything in particular. Just the fact that you are here, the fact that you are breathing, the fact that the day has ended and you are safe and you are warm and you are lying in the position of someone who is being held by the earth beneath them. The gravity that is pulling your body gently toward the center of the planet is not just a physical force. It is the earth holding you. The same earth that held the Lakota elder who sat with bare feet on the ground and felt the strength coming up through his soles. The same earth that Black Elk walked on when he described the circle of all things. The same earth that the Navajo woman was walking on when she said the Beauty Way prayer at the end of a ceremony. The earth does not distinguish. It holds everyone equally. with exactly the same quiet power. It has been doing this since before any human foot touched it, and it will continue after the last human foot has lifted. You are, for this brief time, among the ones who are held. You are in the circle. You are part of all the relations, whether you know it or not, whether you feel it or not. But perhaps right now, in this soft and open state, you can feel it a little more than usual. The warmth of the mattress or the ground beneath you, conducting the heat of the earth up through layers of material to your body, keeping you at exactly the temperature a living thing needs to be kept. The air entering and leaving your lungs, its composition a result of billions of years of life adjusting and being adjusted by the atmosphere of this planet, until the right ratio of oxygen and nitrogen and trace elements was found, the ratio that makes your particular biochemistry possible. The absolute silence, if there is silence, or the sounds, if there are sounds, the both of which were present on those plains 150 years ago. And the breath of the stars, and the breath of the grass, and the breath of the sleeping child in the lodge were all part of the same continuous breath. Somewhere on those plains right now, though they are changed, though the railroads ran through them and the fences divided them, and the great buffalo herds are mostly gone, somewhere there is still the sky that the Pawnee loved, still the stars that the Lakota named, still the wind that the Navajo called father, still the earth that the Cherokee belonged to. Somewhere, an elder still carries a fragment of that ancient knowledge, tenderly, carefully, the way you carry something irreplaceable. And somewhere, that knowledge is being given to a young person who will carry it forward, imperfectly, beautifully, the way all human knowledge is carried, in the bodies and hearts of people who love it enough to keep it alive. You do not need to go to those plains to receive the benefit of that knowledge. You are already receiving it. Every breath is already Mitakuye Oyasin, all relations, all connected. Every moment is already Hozho, already walking in beauty, if you can allow yourself to be here enough to feel it. Every star above you right now is already a story, already a teacher, already a relative, whether or not you know its name. The sleeping mind does not need names. The sleeping mind already knows. It knows the roundness of all things. It knows the way the circle turns. It knows the still center and the spinning wheel and the path between them. The part of you that is not quite asleep and not quite awake already knows what the Pawnee astronomer knew, what the Lakota holy man knew, what the Navajo elder knew, what the Cherokee grandmother knew, what every human being who has ever lain down on the earth under the stars has known in those final moments before sleep arrived, that you are held, that you are part of something, that the night is not empty but full, that the darkness is not absence but presence, a different quality of the same world that you move through in the light, that the dream you are about to enter is not a departure from reality, but a deepening of it, a descent into the layers that waking life does not have the stillness to reach. The earth is the same earth it has always been. The stars are the same stars. The knowledge is the same knowledge. It has always been available. It has always been here, patient, unhurried, completely uninterested in whether you believe in it or not, because it does not depend on your belief to be true. It simply is. The way the earth simply is. The way the sky simply is. And you, right now, breathing slowly, weight settling, thoughts loosening their grip like hands that have been holding something for a very long time and are finally, gratefully allowed to open, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. At the center, which is everywhere. In the hoop, which holds everything. In the beauty, which is before you and behind you and above you and below you. The stars are out. The plains are wide. The earth is warm. The great mystery is everywhere. And in the oldest prayer of the oldest knowledge of this land, something is said for you right now. Quietly, without words, in the language that the stars speak to the ground, and the ground receives in its patient, loving way. All my relations, all my relations, all my relations, walk in beauty, rest in beauty, dream in beauty. The night is holding you, and the earth is holding the night, and something that has no name is holding it all. Sleep well, curious heart. Until next time, or in the timeless space where all times meet and all knowledge is one, and all things rest in each other, as they always have and always will. Good night.